And so this JAG officer, she's sitting down and she goes, I don't think you should go to higher detention. Now, again, I just went out there. The ODA risked our lives. The Iraqi scouts risked their lives. The witnesses that gave us this testimony risked their lives. And now we're just going to let this dude out because you don't think you should go to higher detention? Pray tell. That was a very eye-opening moment for me on what exactly are we doing here?
So you got to deploy twice, Iraq. What was it like in Iraq as an ODA?
It was, we were doing a counterinsurgency mission there. So obviously at that stage, a lot of what got me to want to go SF was watching the initial invasion of Afghanistan and watching the horse soldiers and triple nickel with 5th Group and whatnot. That was the unconventional warfare mission. I was doing the counterinsurgency mission, which is working with the newly established Iraqi government to defeat, Al-Qaeda and other, Sunni and Shia-backed militias. It was a good mission. What became very, very frustrating to me, because I was there in 06 and 08. 08, I felt like we got a lot more done.
Yeah.
06, we went over there and we were operating around Beiji, Iraq, which is where one of the largest oil refineries is at. So we trained up an Iraqi scout platoon and we would go do combat operations. And a lot of what we were relying on was human. Back in 2008, we had a lot more assets available. And so I think the entire military had learned a lot more about how to stack various intel assets in order to get better. So I would say like our dry hole figure in 06 was like maybe 60, 70%. In 2008, it was more like 20, 10, 15. Like we were a lot more likely if we rolled outside the wire, we were getting our guy. And that just made for a much better tour.
Sure, yeah.
It was also interesting because we moved into that transition in 2008 where you had to have a warrant. So you really felt like you were operating more like a police force. And I remember I had my dad fly up from California when I was stationed in Washington, and the ODA came over and my dad ran us through kind of a process on how do you do. We couldn't do interrogations.
Was this as a result of President Obama come in?
He hadn't come in yet in 08. It was more of trying to, and I understood it. Right. This part was, we wanted the Iraqis to take responsibility for running their own country. We wanted to kind of differentiate between, okay, what is a law enforcement complaint? What is a military complaint? How do we process through a newly established legal system? So I understood all of that.
Okay, yeah, and so it's more of them, Iraq setting up this system to go get bad guys in a law enforcement type capacity. Yeah,
and it's frustrating to an operator that just wants to go out and operate. But if you're doing SF mission and you understand this is about building host nation capacity, then you find the good in it. Like now, if I had to get approval to do all these other things before, and some JAG officer decided to say no, and I can't do it, or some battle space owner said no, you can't do it. Well, now I'm like, I have a warrant from the criminal court of Iraq, right? Step aside. This is their country, right? Yeah. And I'm the guy that's rolling with them. So you could find a lot of freedom in that if you did it right.
Yeah.
But then you also learn the process of like, I had to take witnesses down to the Central Criminal Court of Iraq in order to give testimony to a judge. So there's just different things that you ended up learning that were interesting. But the politics did start to come into play more, where it was a lot harder to get outside the wire. I remember one time we had probably 10 different sworn statements on this guy that we rolled and picked up, and we had to take him over and drop him off. This is 08. We had to drop him off to the conventional brigade that we were working with. And in order to keep them in their detention center, I had to go before the judge advocate general. Like it was almost like you had the XO or the operations officer for the brigade. And then I almost have like a prosecuting attorney and a defense attorney. And that was a little weird because I'm a sergeant first class, and I carried this. I did it as kind of a joke. I had this full cardboard cutout of John Wayne from the Green Berets, and I kept having to go over to these brigade staff meetings, and I'm the lowest ranking guy there. So I show up to one of these things, and I pull out John Wayne, and I set him up right next to me. And they're like, Sergeant Freitas, what the hell is that? I'm like, oh, just got tired of getting outranked by all you guys, so brought the Duke with me. John Wayne ever pretend to be one of you guys? No? All right, then. And so they put up with me. But I'm sitting there, and I got this guy. We got this bad guy, 2 of them.
Right.
As I'm laying out, and I've been up for 48 hours at this point because we went through, multiple houses, got our guys, come back, fingerprinting, medical examination, battlefield interviews, like all that stuff. And I've been up for 48 hours straight between planning, operations, and recovering them. And so I'm exhausted, and I'm a smart ass.
Yeah.
And an exhausted smart ass can be a little bit flippant, especially when you're used to operating in an environment where we don't take rank quite as seriously. And so this JAG officer, she's sitting down and she goes, I don't think you should go to higher detention. Now, again, I just went out there. The ODA risked our lives. The Iraqi scouts who risked their lives. The witnesses that gave us this testimony risked their lives. And now we're just going to let this dude out because you don't think you should go to higher detention? Pray tell. And she goes, well, I don't think you have sufficient evidence. I said, I have 10 sworn statements from 10 independent Iraqis that say, she goes, I said, is it just me or are eyewitness statements no longer sufficient evidence? She goes, well, it would be better if you had DNA evidence. I'm like, oh, ma'am, I'm so sorry. I left my CSI Baghdad kit at home. I didn't bring that. And at this time, the ops officer is now like, Sergeant Freitas. I'm like, withdrawn. Like, I'm sorry. Like, what do you want me to say?
She's been watching CSI over there. Or
right. And she goes, well, I think they're picking on him. I'm sorry. You think people came to give me sworn testimony to go into their neighborhood and get this guy out and they're just picking on him? Well, it's because he's homosexual. And like I said, do you have DNA evidence of that? Ops officer, Sergeant Freitas, sorry. But we're going through this whole process. I'm like, I said, I don't know what we're supposed to do as far as conducting operations to keep people safe. If when Iraqi civilians come in and say, these two guys have conducted these operations, they're bad guys, we really need them out of our neighborhood. Then we go and get them, then we bring them into detention. If you let them back out, understand something. Somebody's probably going to die because they know somebody talked and they already have an idea of who that might be. And people are going to start turning on each other. We're going to lose our source network within this particular area. And I'm going to start to question why the hell we're risking our lives doing anything if this is all it takes to release somebody. They ended up going to higher detention. But that was a very eye-opening moment for me on what exactly are we doing here?
Yeah.
And why would this be your decision? Shouldn't this be the Iraqi court system's decision?
Why are we intervening at that level?
Yeah. So the difficulty with conducting 2008 was kind of a pivotal moment for me because I had been in 11 years active duty and I had some really good opportunities coming up. I had got to go to Sephardic, which is kind of like our high speed, CQB school. So at this point I'd been in 18 Bravo, I'd been 18 Fox. I was one of the senior guys on the team.
There's weapons and comms, right?
Intel.
Yeah, weapons and intel. Okay.
So I got to do the intel piece, which I really liked. And my next stop was probably going to be to go to Oki and either be on the SIF or what they used to call the Commanders and Extremist Force. And then I was going to be a team sergeant.
Can you tell everybody what that is? Because the ODAs is like what traditional Green Berets are at ODAs, right?
Yeah. Well, and a SIF team is an ODA, but it's an ODA with a very focused mission. And the way to think of it is a SIF team, ideally, some are not, but ideally they're forward located. So for first group, that was Okinawa. For 10th group, that would have been Germany. For 7th group, that would have been, I think, somewhere in South America. I'm not sure. So you're forward deployed, and part of that whole process is that you are one of the premier forward deployed, like hostage rescue, CQB forces that you can be utilized and work with host nation elements. So it was definitely considered a prestigious position. Not to say I would have gotten that, but you go to Sephardic, that's usually you're either going from there or you're going to Sephardic to go to there. So I would have had a good shot. And I remember I had a conversation with my sergeant major at the time, Jerry, who was a great guy, great sergeant major. And he was the guy that always wanted to put us on the enemy. He always wanted to put us on the enemy and do our job. And it was always, and I told him, I said, I think I'm getting out. He goes, why? I said, look, I love my wife. I love my kids. I was there for my youngest daughter's birth, but I missed her first everything, Christmas, and look, guys missed a whole lot more than I ended up missing. But I looked at him and I said, it is one thing. I said, my family gets it. I said, my wife is wonderful. She gets it. And she sees the whole family serving, not just me. But if you're going to ask me to go over there and miss all of this stuff and then not be allowed to do my mission, I'm not doing that.
Right.
You get one or the other. I get to do my mission. My family will continue to serve. I don't get to do my mission. I'm going to go find some other way to serve my country because this is ridiculous. I've
heard that for so many guys. And that saddens me because I love our country. I love our military. Mm-hmm. And, so many great guys, especially in the special operations community, all this training, and they just want to do their job. Mm-hmm. And politics and, leadership that's usually not, it comes down from outside of uniform. Leadership pushes them down and keeps guys from doing their job. And morale goes down and they leave.
Yeah.
and go do something else.
Well, and then they don't have your back when it looks bad. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.